expects to be ignorant and free, expects what never was and never will be. And the people are going to get the information, and they're going to react to it, I believe.
Fascinating. John, thank you. Barbara, I'm going to see you later in the show. We have to fit something in right now. Breaking news on this Friday night. House Democrats are now moving forward on what is widely expected to be an epic showdown to get, legally, Donald Trump's tax returns. We have NBC reporting from Washington right now. The House committee with the authority to get these taxes is moving forward on the steps for something we've discussed previously, a formal request to the IRS, lawyers working explicitly on language. The chair of that committee, Richard Neal, working with other top Democrats who are involved in order to strengthen the legal case. This is an advancement of a story we've been tracking. And Jason Johnson in Washington is for us from theroot.com. What is the news tonight?
Well, the news is that you've got Ways and Means that they're going to formally ask for the president's tax returns. But, Ari, this has to do also with what we saw earlier this week with the Oversight Committee. Now, the Oversight Committee could ask for the president's tax returns, but they would have to basically subpoena them, and then you would have a big court battle. Ways and Means can actually say, look, we want the president's tax returns. But the catch is this. They can't just say, you know, how many M's you got in your bank account. They can't just demand it. They have to say, we need your tax returns in order to pass a certain kind of law. So that's why the language is important.
Can they ask how many commas, Jason?
They could ask how many commas. They could ask how many commas he got.
I have a U.S. Senator standing by, but on this breaking news, I now turn to ask you the analysis. There has been so much talk about Trump's tax returns for so long. What do you see as the import of this coming against the backdrop of the Cohen hearings?
Well, there's two things. Number one, you notice that Ocasio-Cortez, in the hearings, she mentioned, Trump's golf course and inflating the taxes. That is in the Southern District of New York. So it already becomes a legal issue if they're interested in the tax returns for that case. But also, this is the kind of thing that could be used for the Russia investigation. This could be used to pass future laws about what happens if people try and deflate their assets. There are multiple ways this leads to not only investigations, but possibly new laws.
It's very interesting, given the sequential way we've seen, as you mentioned, multiple Democrats working on this. Thank you, Jason. We keep moving forward, as I mentioned, because Senator Richard Blumenthal is here with me in New York. This is one part of the story. Michael Cohen's testimony sparking all kinds of investigative leads on the congressional side. The Oversight Committee now wants to hear from Don Jr. and Ivanka Trump. The Intel Committee pushing to question the money man himself, Donald Trump's longtime CFO, Alan Weisselberg. Then you have Felix Sater, who was, of course, a key player in Trump Tower Moscow, and also has worked with the FBI, set to testify later this month. And then, of course, the multiple committees, as reported tonight, interested in Donald Trump's tax returns. Add to that Financial Services Chair Maxine Waters with new questions that dig into use and potential abuse of funds by the Trump Foundation. I want to bring in Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal, a former prosecutor himself, who serves on the Judiciary Committee. Thanks for being on the beat tonight.
Thank you very much.
A lot to talk about, but let's begin with the tax returns. What can you tell us about that process of something Democrats have long wanted to do, but it seems now, are these, in your view, concrete steps?
These are very concrete steps, and they are made necessary by the Ways and Means Committee wanting to legislate in this area and protect the public against the kind of tax fraud that was revealed very dramatically in the Cohen hearings, inflating the values of properties to insurance companies or banks. That's fraud. Against the law.
I mean, this is important. You view what Cohen outlined there as, and he said it under oath, if true, and there was some documentation, that alone already meets the bar as fraud by Donald Trump?
That's fraud against those insurance companies. It's bank fraud. It could be fraud against the government. Also, deflating the values for tax purposes. That's tax fraud. So these financial crimes are very consequential. That's a very good reason to want those tax returns and to have good legal reason for them. But also, I think what's striking about the Cohen testimony is the kind of Pandora's box it opened. Not only in terms of witnesses, but also potential crimes. Very few people focused on those financial crimes, which are within the Southern District of New York. As you said before, a lot of prosecutorial ears opened wide and eyes, frankly, at some of what Cohen said about those checks. You mentioned them earlier, and you showed them. They were written and discussed in the Oval Office, after Trump became president. So I think the timing is very important. As Barbara and John mentioned, two great lawyers, that the potential for conspiracy there involves literally the seat of government. And I think all of the Cohn testimony is very consequential in that way.
Yeah, it seemed like a significant thing, even in a time where people are somewhat inured to how many breaking stories there are. I want to widen out and talk about something that was so obvious. It may not need that much discussion, but you're here and you think through these issues on the Judiciary Committee. Take a listen to one of the most absurd lines of attack on Michael Cohen, which was Republicans hammering him for being an alleged liar in the service and defense of a president who has been documented to lie more than any politician in American history. Take a look.
Our first big hearing with, as you and we all know, a convicted liar lying to Congress.
You're a pathological liar. And look at the old adage that our moms taught us: liar, liar, pants on fire.
He's going to prison for lying to Congress, and he's the star witness to Congress.
You know, it's just one more example, Mr. Cohen, of you skirting the truth.
Isn't it absurd for that to be the line in defense of Donald Trump?
Well, the defense of Donald Trump is going to fall and crumble pretty quickly if that's the defense. But remember about Michael Cohen. He has everything to lose and nothing to gain by lying now. Any lie he tells will be quickly a reason to deepen and aggravate the amount of time, already 3 years, he's going to spend behind bars. And Robert Mueller knows everything already that he is telling to Congress. And remember also, and as a former prosecutor, perhaps not normal, as you said, as a person, and now I'm a senator,
things that get you interested, yeah.
So I'm doubly not normal. But remember, the arguments we make to juries using witnesses who have committed crimes, they're not choir boys. You can't have choir boys to prove these kinds of serious crimes. Right. And we tell juries, don't leave your common sense at the door. The court here is the court of public opinion, not a jury in a courtroom, but the same kind of approach has to apply. The American people have to use their common sense.
I think, Senator, you make such an important point, because that's why this was different. There is something in common, as you know. A jury and the court of public opinion are both made up of regular citizens who have what we would call a BS detector for some of what the folks in the building that you serve in do, for some of the grandiosity of partisan speeches. But this week wasn't about partisan speeches. It was about this guy who was riding with Donald Trump for 10 years. And so the American people can listen to him and figure out what seems credible or not when he has so much to lose if he lies now. And look at the character of the man presented. I want to get your response, of course. And then Jason Johnson, I want to ask as well about the Kushner security clearance.
And there's corroboration here. There are documents. There are other witnesses. We're going to hear from those other witnesses. And what is so striking about what Donald Trump did was he was willing to solicit and accept help from a foreign, hostile adversary, the Russian government, to help him get elected. And that kind of threat to our national security, we're seeing it again in the security clearance given improperly to Jared Kushner because the president overruled his own intelligence and security advisors and professionals, I think speaks fundamentally to why you saw nobody defending Donald Trump as a person. All of it was attacking Cohen.
Right, which I think is telling. Senator Richard Blumenthal, as you say, former prosecutor and U.S. Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with me on Set on the Beat. Before we go, Jason Johnson's been following these stories for us, and the last one is, Jason, the New York Times has basically documented the allegation that Donald Trump and his family members lied about nepotistic overruling of the intelligence community to rush out a clearance for Jared Kushner. What do you believe matters about that story as everything else is going on?
That basically we run the risk of our national security being for sale across the world. Look, at a very basic level, Ari, whether you're in the FBI or CIA and anything else like that, you can't get security clearance if you have a certain debt-to-income ratio. And so under most circumstances, Jared Kushner would never be allowed to get access to this kind of information because he owes so much money and he's got so much that he might want to leverage. So the fact that the president stepped in and said, hey, you can still get into the club, sneak in the back, and went over our national security, so much so that even Kelly felt like he needed to write a memo to say I wasn't in favor of this, indicates how dangerous our national security has been compromised by Jared Kushner.
Yeah. Jason Johnson, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Coming up,